when a pale, motionless boy in the corner of the hospital ward suddenly stirred awake after months of silent oblivion, the night nurse almost dismissed it as a chance reflex. But then he murmured a single sentence so chilling that it sent her dashing into the hallway, alerting every on-duty staffer in a heartbeat. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for the power of courage, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Jason Wells was 14 years old, and until that night, he had spent several excruciating months in a coma with doctors offering only guarded optimism. Some believed he would never wake, that the trauma from his fall down the grand staircase of the Wells family estate had simply been too severe. Others clung to the faint possibility of a miracle, fueled by the hope that such a young mind might find a path back to consciousness. When his eyelids fluttered open in the small hours of the morning, blinking against the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, the only witness to his return was a single nurse busy checking vitals. She froze as his voice, rough from disuse, croaked out, "Someone pushed me." That one phrase shattered the hush of the hospital corridor, sending staff racing to his bedside. In the weeks that followed, Jason occupied a private room plastered with get-well cards from well-meaning acquaintances. He remained frail and disoriented, fragments of memory dancing on the edges of his awareness. Doctors hovered, prodding him with cognitive tests, while nurses tried to coax him into conversation to gauge how much he remembered. He struggled to speak at first. His throat felt like sandpaper, words coming in strained whispers. But those whispers set off tremors among the hospital staff. Everyone had assumed Jason's fall down the enormous staircase in the Wells mansion was a tragic accident. Maybe he had tripped or fainted or suffered a dizzy spell. His paternal uncle, Vincent Holloway, had even publicly expressed sorrow at the unfortunate mishap. Yet here lay Jason, timidly insisting someone had deliberately shoved him. The hospital suite buzzed with rumors. Security guards offered side glances each time someone entered Jason's room, scanning for suspicious characters. Among staff, quiet talk of the boy who was pushed circulated. The local press got wind of it too, printing cautious pieces about possible foul play in the Wells estate accident, though no official statement confirmed it. At first, Jason's recollections were too hazy to act upon. He recalled only a hand at his back, a powerful thrust, and then the sickening sensation of falling, followed by darkness. He tried piecing together the final day before the accident, flickers of footsteps echoing in the marble foyer, a heated argument echoing off tall walls, something about his missing parents, and an uncle who had assumed control over the estate. Then the rest was blank. Detective Ryan Mercer of the local police department had been loosely involved from the start, filing a simple report about Jason's injuries when paramedics rushed him to the hospital. The detective was in his mid-30s, known for a meticulous approach to investigations. He had first assumed the matter was a straightforward accident, but once the rumors of Jason's claim grew, Mercer found himself drawn deeper. He arrived at the hospital one late afternoon, slipping into the boy's room while a nurse was checking vitals. Jason was half sitting against a propped pillow, eyes distant. Mercer leaned forward, careful not to overwhelm him. "I'm Detective Mercer," he said quietly. "We spoke months ago, right after your fall, but you were unconscious. The doctors say you believe someone pushed you. Can you tell me more?" Jason's eyes darted nervously. He massaged his bandaged forearm, a lingering injury from the tumble. "It's all fuzzy," he murmured, voice cracking with disuse. There was a hand on my back. I remember hearing footsteps behind me, and then I fell." Mercer nodded, frowning in concentration. "You're sure it wasn't a slip?" Jason's brow furrowed. "I know how it sounds," he whispered. "But I felt the pressure. This wasn't me losing balance. It was more like someone wanted me out of the way." That conversation, the first real statement Jason provided, set in motion a chain of events none of them could have foreseen. With a teenage boy as the potential victim of attempted murder, Mercer began digging around. He discovered that Jason's parents had vanished years earlier under bizarre circumstances, leaving the family estate in the hands of Jason's uncle, Vincent Holloway. According to official records, the parents had traveled abroad and never returned, presumed lost at sea or victims of a crime overseas. Their disappearance turned the Wells property and substantial inheritance over to Vincent by default, naming him caretaker for Jason until the boy came of age. But as Mercer peeled back layers of documents, he found odd gaps. Missing travel itineraries, no confirmed sightings of the parents after they supposedly left the country, and contradictory statements from Vincent about the timeline. The detective revisited the Wells mansion for a fresh look. A sprawling estate with manicured gardens, towering gates, and grand architecture, it stood as a testament to old money. Inside, the fabled grand staircase curled up to the second floor, its polished banisters reflecting the overhead chandeliers. Mercer pictured the scene: a 14-year-old boy at the top, perhaps confronted by someone. Then, a violent push, a horrifying tumble down many steps, and an unconscious victim left to be discovered by staff. Vincent himself had been absent when paramedics arrived, only showing up later with claims he'd been out on business. Mercer attempted to speak with Vincent about the new allegations. The man, in his early 50s, possessed a polished air, every hair in place, words chosen with the care of a seasoned politician. He stood in the estate's cavernous foyer, greeting the detective with a forced smile. "I'm deeply concerned for Jason's well-being," Vincent said, voice measured. "But the boy is confused from the coma. He barely remembers his name. I'm sure he believes he was pushed, but we both know how illusions can spring from a traumatized mind. It's a tragedy, nothing more." Mercer tried to press, asking about the day of the accident or details about the parents' disappearance, but Vincent deflected. "My brother and sister-in-law vanished on a trip years ago, and I've mourned them daily. As for Jason, I've done my best to care for him. It's absurd to suggest anyone here would harm him." Mercer noted the flicker of annoyance in Vincent's eyes. The detective left the mansion unconvinced. Something about the man felt too controlled, too perfect. He decided to keep digging. Meanwhile, Jason, from his hospital bed, underwent physical therapy to relearn basic motor skills. Each day, a therapist guided him through painful exercises, reminding him how to walk steadily, how to climb small steps. Jason's frustration sometimes boiled over. Nightmares plagued him about the fall, leaving him in a cold sweat. Nurses offered him mild sedatives, but he refused them after a while, wanting to keep his mind sharp. He confided in Mercer that he heard echoes in his nightmares of an argument about the estate, about controlling shares of a family trust. "I can't see who it was," he'd whisper, "but I hear voices talking about signing something, about me not needing to be around." The detective, scribbling notes, felt a chill. Could the boy have been an obstacle to someone's plan? As days turned to weeks, Jason's stamina improved. The doctors allowed him short walks around the hospital corridors, monitored closely. On one such walk, he swore he glimpsed a shadowy figure watching him from the end of the hall. By the time a nurse turned to look, the figure was gone. Jason's heart pounded. He told Mercer later that he was certain someone was spying on him. The detective arranged for an officer to be near the ward, but no further sightings occurred. Still, anxiety clung to Jason. He felt isolated, uncertain whom to trust. The staff tried to maintain a friendly environment, but the hospital's fluorescent glow and lingering antiseptic smell only emphasized how far he was from normal life. One quiet afternoon, a new presence appeared in Jason's room. A lawyer named Marion Kelsey, representing the Wells family estate. She introduced herself politely, explaining that her firm managed the legal affairs for the estate under Vincent's instruction. She offered Jason her condolences about the accident, then gently mentioned guardianship issues. Vincent, she said, had petitioned for full control of the estate until Jason turned 18, but with Jason's recovery, some details might need to be revised. She smiled too sweetly. "Your uncle is worried about your stress levels," Marion said. "We only want what's best for you." Jason studied her carefully, sensing a carefully scripted approach. He gave noncommittal answers, deciding he didn't trust her. When he told Mercer about the visit later, the detective's suspicion grew. "They're trying to keep you from challenging anything," Mercer said, tapping his pen on a notepad. "If you were to claim your rightful share or question what truly happened to your parents, your uncle might have a lot to lose." Around the same time, a hospital staffer approached Mercer quietly, revealing that some of Jason's medical records had gone missing from the file room. The staffer suspected tampering, because an official who claimed to be from Vincent's legal team had requested access, but never signed the log. Mercer realized then how deep this might go. Someone was meddling, possibly to ensure Jason had no official record of certain injuries that might point to foul play. The detective took steps to secure the rest of Jason's documents, scanning them for duplications. He warned the hospital administrators to be on alert for any suspicious visitors. Despite these ominous signs, Jason's physical rehabilitation progressed. After 3 months in the hospital, the doctors deemed him stable enough for discharge, albeit with continuing therapy at an outpatient facility. Jason had no real home, though, beyond the estate run by the very man he suspected. The idea of returning to those halls where he nearly died twisted his stomach into knots. Mercer arranged a temporary protective order, stating that until the investigation concluded, Jason would not be forced back into Vincent's care. A state-appointed caretaker named Helen Turner took him in, a woman known for fostering older children in crisis. Her small suburban house felt cramped but warm, a stark contrast to the marble opulence of the Wells mansion. Jason slept in a humble bedroom, its furniture mismatched but comforting. For the first time in a long while, he heard the quiet hum of a normal household, morning cereal in chipped bowls, local news on a battered TV. It was an odd mixture of relief and dislocation. Helen was calm, patient, never pressing him about the case. She gave him space to process the swirling accusations and half-remembered traumas. Mercer visited regularly, updating Jason about the slow-moving investigation. The detective explained that they had found evidence of suspicious transactions in the family accounts after his parents vanished, funneling large sums to unknown shell companies. "It looks like your uncle might be laundering money," Mercer said, eyes narrowing. "The question is whether that ties to your parents' disappearance." Jason tried to remember if he'd ever overheard arguments about finances, but his memories stayed fragmented. Sometimes he woke from nightmares, shivering with the sense that his parents were in danger long before they vanished. A battered suitcase, an argument on the balcony at midnight, a threat of forced signatures. All jumbled images that refused to align. One day, Mercer brought a set of old photographs found in the mansion's attic, showing Jason's parents in seemingly normal times. Family holidays, birthdays, even a business function with smiling executive. Jason recognized some faces from childhood recollections, but a few seemed unfamiliar. "Could these be associates of your uncle?" Mercer asked, laying the pictures out. Jason squinted, tapping one man's face. "I remember him from a dinner party. He was in my father's study, talking about documents." But the memory ended there, abruptly. Mercer jotted notes, determined to identify these individuals. Maybe they were part of a bigger network of corruption. Over the next weeks, he discovered at least 2 had corporate ties to companies now linked to Vincent's questionable finances. The detective suspected a conspiracy bigger than a mere murder attempt. Meanwhile, Jason's daily life became a balancing act. Therapy for his physical injuries, occasional police interviews, and uneasy nights in Helen's spare bedroom. He found some solace in reading old adventure novels she kept on a dusty shelf. The heroic protagonists fighting shadowy enemies resonated with him. But every so often, he'd get phone calls from that estate lawyer, Marion Kelsey, politely urging him to come to the mansion and discuss estate matters. He refused, deeply mistrustful. Kelsey kept insisting Vincent was concerned about his welfare, that they could settle misunderstandings if he returned home. The more she pushed, the more Jason dug in his heels, convinced returning to that house would place him in mortal danger. Then, something unsettling happened. A caretaker from the estate, someone who had served Jason's family for years, vanished under suspicious circumstances. Mercer reported that the caretaker had approached him privately, hinting he possessed proof regarding the parents' disappearance, but wanted to do so carefully for fear of retaliation. Before they could schedule a meeting, the caretaker left a note about going out of town. He never returned. Mercer suspected foul play. This caretaker had been one of the few staff members who might have known the truth about the night Jason's parents vanished. Now he was gone, no forwarding address, no phone contact. Jason, upon hearing, felt a wave of guilt and frustration. Another person who might have shed light on his parents was lost. He realized the conspiracy possibly reached beyond Vincent, possibly involving business partners with influence, capable of silencing witnesses. The thought weighed heavily on him, stirring nightmares of being powerless. Over time, though, a steely resolve formed in him. He told Mercer, "I can't keep hiding in Helen's house. This is my family, my inheritance, my parent. I have to do something." The detective recognized the spark of courage, but also the risk. "We need solid evidence," he cautioned. "If you barge into the estate or confront Vincent without proof, we could lose everything. Keep working with me. I'll see if we can get warrants to search more thoroughly." Jason nodded, though the waiting chafed at him. As the weeks crawled by, Mercer navigated legal red tape, seeking permission to examine certain locked rooms and files at the Wells mansion. Vincent, predictably, blocked every request. Lawyers argued that Jason's accusations were unsubstantiated, the boy's memory unreliable after a severe head injury. The standoff escalated until, one morning, Mercer received an anonymous tip about suspicious documents stored in a hidden safe at the estate. The tipster claimed these papers revealed the parents' fate and unmasked prominent figures behind a grand conspiracy. Mercer sprang into action, petitioning a judge for a search warrant. At last, the judge, influenced by partial evidence of the caretaker's disappearance and financial irregularities, granted a limited search. Within hours, Mercer gathered a small team, heading for the estate. Jason insisted on joining them. The detective hesitated, but realized the boy might identify hidden areas or recall details crucial to the search. They arrived at dawn, the gates opening grudgingly. Vincent appeared in the foyer, furious at the intrusion. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, voice cold. Mercer calmly displayed the warrant. "We have court permission to search certain rooms and safes." Vincent's face tightened. He glowered at Jason, who stood a step behind the detective, unwavering. "You'll regret this, boy," Vincent hissed, voice low enough that only Jason heard. A ripple of fear gripped Jason, but he held Vincent's gaze, determined not to cower. The search team methodically combed rooms, guided by Mercer's note. Jason helped direct them to a hidden study behind the library, a place he vaguely remembered from childhood. Indeed, they found a locked door concealed by a bookshelf. Vincent balked, insisting no such door existed, but the detective forced entry. Inside, dust motes floated in the stale air, revealing a small, cluttered study with old ledgers, locked file cabinets, and a heavy safe. Immediately, Vincent's lawyer arrived, protesting the scope of the search, but Mercer pressed on, unlocking cabinets under the watchful presence of an officer filming for evidence. They discovered bank statements, property transfer deeds, and suspicious correspondence referencing large payments to unknown recipients. Jason flipped through some letters, pausing at his father's handwriting. His chest tightened. The letter hinted that the father suspected a betrayal from within, referencing Vincent's dealings, and a threat if they refused to sign certain documents. Another note, scrawled in his mother's hand, mentioned fleeing the country, urging their son's protection. Jason swallowed back tears. This was proof his parents knew they were in danger. Suddenly, a wave of grief hit him. They might have tried to escape before it was too late. He whispered to Mercer, "We have to find out what he did to them." Before they could delve deeper, a security guard from the estate rushed in, breathless, telling Vincent that some crucial room upstairs was compromised. The remark made no sense to Mercer, but it rattled Vincent. The man spun around, barking orders at the lawyer and guard, effectively trying to stall or redirect the search. Sensing something was amiss, Mercer broke away from the study with Jason, instructing an officer to stand watch over the newly found evidence. They headed upstairs, ignoring Vincent's furious protests. On the second floor, they found a corridor leading to the main bedrooms. One door at the far end was locked with a heavy chain. Jason recognized it as his father's private office. He also recalled that after his parents vanished, Vincent locked it, claiming it was to preserve their memory. Mercer demanded the key. Vincent refused, so an officer cut the chain. Inside, the room was dark, furnishings shrouded under dust covers. In the corner, Jason spotted a battered trunk partially hidden under a table. He and Mercer approached, hearts pounding. Opening it, they discovered personal effects. The mother's journal, some photographs, and a stash of documents that spelled out, in excruciating detail, a conspiracy to seize the Wells fortune. The journal ended abruptly, with Sarah writing about her plan to confront Vincent about illegal transfers. The final line read, "If anything happens, let Jason know we tried." Jason trembled, tears burning in his eyes. Mercer scanned the documents, stunned. This was a goldmine of incrimination, pointing to a scheme orchestrated by Vincent and unnamed associates. They had threatened Jason's parents into signing over controlling stakes in the estate's assets, intending to remove them if they refused. The parents must have tried to run, only to vanish. With a heavy heart, Mercer realized this was the impetus for everything. Jason was the last heir who could legally challenge Vincent's claims, so he too had to be removed. That explained the push down the stairs. They heard commotion behind them. Vincent appeared in the doorway, face twisted in rage, flanked by two of his personal security guards. "You have no right," he spat. Mercer stepped forward, brandishing the discovered papers. "We have every right. These documents prove your involvement in your brother and sister-in-law's disappearance." Vincent lunged forward as though to snatch them, but Mercer pulled Jason aside. The detective signaled for the uniformed officers. A tense standoff ensued in that dusty, claustrophobic office. Vincent's guards eyed the police, hands twitching near concealed weapons. For a moment, it seemed violence would erupt, but cooler heads prevailed. The officers forced Vincent's men to stand down. Vincent, furious, tried to maintain composure. "You're making a grave mistake, Mercer," he seethed. "You're playing with forces beyond your comprehension." The detective responded by reading him his rights, indicating probable cause for arrest on suspicion of conspiracy, attempted murder, and possibly the homicide of Jason's parents if the missing persons case turned out to be murder. Vincent's face went ashen. He still wore that smug veneer, telling the detective, "You have no idea how high this goes. Taking me down won't solve anything. This is bigger than you or me." As he was handcuffed, Vincent hissed to Jason, "When they realize the threat you pose, they'll come for you too." Jason stared at him, dread swirling, but also relief that at last he had some measure of justice for his parents. Officers led Vincent away, ignoring the man's protests that he was an influential figure. Meanwhile, forensic technicians arrived to collect the trunk's contents, the letters, and the suspicious ledgers from the hidden study. The official search ended with a triumphant sense of having peeled back a layer of darkness. Yet Vincent's final warning lingered in Jason's mind. In the weeks that followed, as the legal process began, the arrested uncle dropped cryptic hints about a higher power that orchestrated everything, claiming he was just a pawn. The authorities considered it a desperate tactic, but Mercer and Jason had grown cautious. The boy's near murder, his parents' disappearance, the caretaker's vanishing, the labyrinth of shell companies. These could indeed suggest a network of corruption. As Vincent languished in jail awaiting formal charges, he offered to trade knowledge for leniency, implying influential elites were behind the scheme to seize the Wells fortune. The prosecutor, suspicious, demanded details. Vincent refused to put them in writing, hinting the slightest leak could get him killed in prison. Tension soared. At Jason's request, Mercer arranged a short meeting with Vincent in jail, hoping to glean more. The detective accompanied him, ensuring security. Jason confronted his uncle across the metal table in the visitation room. Vincent looked older behind the glass, but a cunning spark remained in his eyes. "You think you've won," Vincent murmured. "But you've only pried the lid off the box. The ones pulling my strings, they don't like loose ends." Jason, swallowing anger, asked about his parents. "Where are they? Are they dead?" Vincent gave a brittle laugh. "I suspect so. But I never saw bodies. I was told to get them out of the way. My reward was the estate." "Are you satisfied with that answer?" Jason shuddered. "Who told you?" he demanded. Vincent's lips curled. "I won't name them. They're always watching." Then he ended the conversation with a chilling smile. "Pray they don't turn their attention to you." Jason left that meeting feeling sick. Mercer patted his shoulder, trying to comfort him, but the detective, too, appeared spooked. They realized that while Vincent might face justice, a broader conspiracy lurked. The press latched onto the dramatic story. The boy who woke from a coma to accuse his uncle, the revelations of possible corporate corruption. Jason found himself an unwilling figure in the headlines, hounded by local reporters. He dodged them, determined not to become a spectacle. Meanwhile, the case against Vincent advanced, with the trunk's documents and the financial records serving as damning evidence. Prosecutors built a homicide case regarding Jason's parents, though the lack of bodies left uncertainty. People around town rejoiced that justice was finally served, seeing Vincent as a manipulative figure undone by greed. But in the background, events took an ominous turn. Witnesses who had come forward with statements about Vincent's dealings suddenly recanted or disappeared. A small but determined journalist investigating the shell companies vanished under strange circumstances. Mercer, alarmed, tried to protect Jason, keeping him out of the limelight as best he could. But anonymous threats emerged, both for the detective and the boy. Unsigned letters warned them to drop the matter. A phone call in the dead of night told Jason, "You should have stayed in that coma." The final stretch of the story ramped up tension. Jason, living with caretaker Helen, felt increasingly unsafe. He insisted on returning to the Wells mansion, ironically the scene of the crime, believing he might glean further clues to the bigger conspiracy. The estate now belonged to him, or at least was in legal limbo, but he had a right to step inside. Mercer, initially resistant, agreed to accompany him, hoping to find further hidden compartments or records they might have missed. They timed the visit for daylight, bringing a small police detail. Yet fear crackled in the air as they approached the gate. Inside, the mansion felt different with Vincent gone. Dust gathered on furniture, staff had largely been dismissed, and only the echo of their footsteps accompanied them. Jason led them to the far corners, an attic, a private library, the basement. They found scattered traces of the caretaker who vanished, half-finished chores, personal notes about suspicious visitors at odd hours. It became clear that Vincent had hosted secret meetings here, possibly forging alliances with powerful men who wanted the Wells fortune under their control. Mercer collected everything, snapping photos. Meanwhile, Jason lingered in the grand foyer, gazing at the staircase that nearly claimed his life. He laid a hand on the banister, reliving the push, the horror, the darkness that followed. A swirl of defiance rose in him. He survived, and he wouldn't rest until every accomplice in this conspiracy faced the light. Unbeknownst to them, the greatest danger loomed. Late in the evening, as they concluded their search, a silent figure slipped through a side entrance. By the time Jason and Mercer realized they weren't alone, it was too late to avoid confrontation. A tall, masked individual stepped from the shadows, brandishing a gun. The police detail, scattered through the mansion, was taken by surprise. Shots rang out. Jason dove behind an ornate statue, heart pounding. Mercer shouted commands, returning fire. The intruder moved with lethal skill, evading bullets, determined to eliminate the boy. In the chaos, a policeman was wounded. Jason crawled across the marble floor, adrenaline coursing, as the masked figure advanced. The final showdown erupted in the very place where Jason was once pushed. Bullets ricocheted off pillars, window panes shattered. Mercer tried to flank the assailant, but the intruder was cunning, pinned the detective behind a column. Jason recognized in that masked presence the embodiment of the deeper conspiracy Vincent had warned about, someone dispatched to ensure the last loose end was cut. Summoning courage, Jason lured the gunman up the staircase, calling out, "You want me? Here I am." The man pursued, hissing threat. On the second-floor landing, the assailant cornered Jason, weapon raised. The boy's stomach clenched with terror, but he refused to cower. The masked figure sneered beneath the hood, growling, "You should have stayed down that night." At that moment, Mercer appeared behind the intruder, gun drawn. "It's over," Mercer said, voice taut. The intruder spun, reflexively firing. Mercer squeezed the trigger. 2 shots blasted. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then the masked figure staggered, dropping the gun, tumbling forward. He crashed down the steps, ironically mirroring Jason's fall from months ago, but with finality in every bounce. Reeling from adrenaline, Jason sank to his knees, chest heaving. Mercer rushed to him, eyes wide. "Are you hit?" he gasped. Jason shook his head, trembling. They descended the stairs to find the intruder lying motionless, the mask partially slipped to reveal a face they didn't recognize, a hired operative, perhaps, or some enforcer. The man coughed once, then went still. A swirl of police arrived, radioing for paramedic. Mercer gently led Jason aside, letting him breathe through the shock. The authorities launched an immediate investigation, discovering the intruder's ties to one of Vincent's shell corporations. It confirmed the existence of a broad network that apparently recruited killers to tie up loose ends. Meanwhile, the shootout catapulted the story into national news for a brief cycle, painting Jason as the brave teen who survived not 1 but 2 attempts on his life. Vincent, from prison, refused to speak on the matter, no doubt in fear of retribution from the same shadowy group. But the intruder's demise, plus the trove of documents found in the mansion, effectively ended any immediate threat to Jason. The state indicted several of Vincent's associates, unraveling more secrets about shell companies and high-level corruption. One by one, individuals linked to the conspiracy faced arrest, though some vanished, presumably warned by insiders. In the final 25% of the story, matters swiftly resolved. Vincent stood trial, facing charges for conspiracy to murder Jason's parents, orchestrating Jason's fall, and engaging in massive financial crimes. The trunk's documents and the hidden files from the second-floor office formed a damning case. Vincent's smug demeanor cracked in court as witness after witness testified. The caretaker's disappearance remained unsolved, but the evidence was overwhelming. A guilty verdict loomed. In a last-ditch attempt at a plea deal, Vincent spilled partial names of higher-ups involved, though many had already gone underground. The trial ended with Vincent Holloway convicted on multiple counts, sentenced to decades in prison. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored, snapping pictures of Jason and Mercer. Jason, now walking with a confidence born of survival, answered politely, then slipped away, uninterested in the spotlight. With Vincent behind bars, the estate's control reverted fully to Jason. Still only 15 by then, he legally required a guardian to help manage it. He insisted on continuing to live with caretaker Helen rather than move into that echoing mansion alone. Over time, a plan formed to transform the estate into something beneficial for the community, perhaps a foundation named after his parents, dedicated to helping traumatized youth. Mercer, impressed by Jason's resolve, offered guidance, connecting him with honest legal counsel. The heavy gloom that once hung over the house lifted as staff returned, dusting off furniture, preparing for the estate's new purpose. At last, Jason felt the missing pieces of his life slot into place. He still ached for his parents, uncertain if their bodies would ever be found. The official conclusion was that Vincent orchestrated their disappearance to seize power. Though the final details remained murky, Jason found a measure of closure. The conspirators who used his uncle as a pawn had receded into the shadows, some facing charges, others fleeing. The detective suspected that in the upper echelons of corporate power, a few major players remained unpunished. But for Jason, the immediate threat was vanquished. He could rest. One evening, months after the trial, Jason invited Mercer over for a quiet dinner at Helen's house. They sat in the living room, a simple meal of takeout, and recounted the harrowing events that started with Jason waking from a coma. "I never saw myself as a detective's partner," Jason joked, forcing a small laugh. Mercer smirked. "You're braver than most adults I know," he replied, bumping Jason's shoulder affectionately. The boy's face flushed with gratitude. They had become close friends, their bond forged in danger. In that moment, they both realized how drastically life had changed since the day Jason opened his eyes in the hospital. At the mansion, a small staff prepared for a new chapter. The front parlor was converted into a reading room for local kids, stuffed with donated books. The billiard room turned into an art studio, commemorating Jason's mother's creative spirit. The estate no longer felt like a mausoleum of secrets, but rather a symbol of resilience. Jason, supervised by Helen and honest attorneys, oversaw these changes, determined that the property's wealth would serve some good. Media coverage died down, replaced by new headlines, but those who followed the story admired how the once helpless boy overcame corruption. As life normalized, Jason sometimes roamed the estate's gardens at dusk, remembering the parents he lost, the caretaker who vanished, the attempts on his life. The shadows no longer terrified him, but a pang of sadness lingered. He'd whisper small prayers or messages to his mom and dad, hoping they found peace wherever they were. The sense of closure was not absolute, but it carried the calm acceptance that he was safe now, forging his own destiny. In the final, short outro paragraph, Jason found himself on the mansion's grand staircase one last time, gazing down at the foyer that had once been stained with his blood. A wave of gratitude washed over him. He survived not only a coma but a deep-rooted conspiracy, and he did so with unwavering bravery and the support of people who genuinely cared. As the night breeze drifted through an open window, carrying the scent of roses from the garden, Jason breathed in the promise of a future no longer weighed by fear. The mansion lights glowed softly, a sign that new life thrived here. Detective Ryan Mercer, standing at the foot of the stairs, offered him a nod of friendship. Jason smiled, stepping down each step with confidence. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already and subscribe for more.